Good evening and a very warm welcome to this event from the Bristol Festival Ideas Online. My name's Jenny Lacey and tonight we have Kevin Maxwell with us to relate how, as a young, gay, black man, he had a dream of serving as a police officer and delivering justice and equality. Sadly, the reality of his time in the Greater Manchester Police and the Met in London turned out to be very different from his idealistic views, and he was finally forced to leave an institution he describes as both racist and homophobic. Kevin has now written an account of his experiences. It's called Forced Out, and he works to bring about change both within the police and in their treatment of the communities they serve. So we're going to have a chat about Kevin and his experiences, and you're very welcome to ask questions at any time, and we will come to them at some point. And you can buy a copy of Kevin's book, and there's a link at the bottom for you to do that. So Kevin, a warm welcome. And can you first of all introduce us to young Kevin? Because I loved young Kevin. I had this kind of whole, I mean, it's very, very important, young Kevin, but this whole obsessed with the police, I imagine you always in a helmet, with a siren probably on your little trike, because the dream started early, didn't it?
Yeah, so hi Jenny, thanks for having a chat with me. It's probably still in me, but young Kevin was pretty much a geek. I think most of my friends would probably say that. I sort of call myself a stiff now, but yeah, when I was 5, my mum got me a bike and it was decorated in police stickers. And she also got me a helmet. I remember the gold color, like the helmet from the Chips, the American television series about the cops. And yeah, I wanted to just like, sounds like a cliche, but it's true, serve and protect. And, I wanted to help my community and look after people. And I think we are who we are. And it's always been in me to want to help people. And that's obvious in the type of things I did as I grew. So when I was 10, I took myself off to the St. Jude Ambulance Cadets. When I was 13, I took myself off to the RAF Cadets. Now, people say to me, oh, you must have been a bad kid, needing all that discipline. No, I took myself off because I just loved life. If it wasn't watching television and cop shows and dreaming of, getting older. And I used to want to work for the police for free. I used to think because I'd like it so much, they didn't have to pay me. Obviously, I grew in, part of the real world where you need money to survive. But yeah, I even wanted to be a policeman for free. So yeah, I love life. I was very much an explorer. I adored my mum. I mean, people say it, and I always give this caveat that my life wasn't the Waltons. But growing up, people who know me from primary school, secondary school, I was pretty much a happy kid, always smiling. I've said it like twice. I just love life. I love being an explorer, adventure with the RAF cadets and St. John Albans cadets, and I was pretty much like that until 23. So coming out was pretty okay. It was more than pretty okay, but it was great. My mum was so accepting, even for a woman of her generation in her 60s, telling her that I was gay, actually saying those words. My family always knew I was different because like when we played doctors and nurses, I was more interested in playing doctors and chasing the boys around my estate. So people knew I was different, but they just let me be me. But it changed at the age 23. Sorry, Jenny, when I joined the police.
Yeah. So let's bring you on to that, because in a sense, everything in your background should have said the police was not right for you. You grew up in Toxteth in Liverpool at the height of the riots. You grew up when the police were perhaps seen as the enemy by most people in your community. It was a surprising choice, and I can see the idea of the cop shows and all the rest of it, but it was a surprising choice, and people must have warned you off.
Yes, I mean, it's sort of a second book I'm working on, but I went for group therapy. Sort of first time I said this publicly. Many of my peers asked, why did someone like you join? A journalist recently asked me the same question, an Irish journalist, and I've genuinely not got an answer in terms of, I was a boy with a dream. Should we be telling our children not to follow their dreams? My mother, God bless her, wasn't the sort of woman who put us off doing things. So if some of my friends would say, don't go to East Europe, for example, because it's racist, I would be the first person to go to East Europe and experience for myself. My mum used to say to me growing up, don't listen to people, go and find out things for yourself. So the fact that I was seduced and obsessed by the force as a young child, and the billboards used to point to people like me. Kevin, we want people like you, mixed race, black, gay, from a working class poor community in Liverpool, fairly intelligent. I'd been to university, so I ticked the diversity boxes, so-called diversity boxes, and I was actually somebody who wanted to do the job. But it was my white liberal friends at University of Manchester who told me they have not changed enough. I mean, they never said it would ruin you, but they just didn't. No one encouraged me. But ironically, it wasn't my family. It wasn't the black community in toxic Liverpool who discouraged me. I still find that a bit not strange, but they were the ones who let me be. But it was actually my white liberal friends who were saying, it's not for you. Not for me as a person, but for a black gay guy, it will be too much. And they don't say we told you so, but the account of my experience in Four Star, the book I've written, details that the reality was very much different to the dream.
Can I ask you a question about? I mean, obviously, mixed race, black. There you are. Being gay, did you feel, particularly in the police, that it was always important to be completely upfront? Because you didn't need to say that. You didn't need to make that part. That could have been your private life. I wondered, reading the book, whether it was because you were frightened that you might have been outed, or people might have seen you somewhere in a gay club or whatever, or whether you just feel that that's who I am and therefore take it or leave it.
So I used to say often, I mean, you've just a great question, but you've made me think of quite a few things. So when I went to University of Manchester, I came out. For many people, when you go to college or university, it's the place where you can be yourself, try things. And yeah. I mean, I loved my time. I loved the social life more than the actual studying at Salford. So yeah, I was fully out to people around me in the workplace. I worked in the workplace in terms of part-time jobs I had with Debenhams I used to work for, and Virgin Megastore, and I was just me. And I used to think that I'm mixed race black. I can't hide that, so it's pointless hiding my sexuality. But as I started going through the police application process, and I'm the sort of person who does his research. If I've got sort of a task, I'd like to, even like doing my police application form, I wrote it out once to make sure I made no mistakes, and then wrote it out again because we didn't have, the internet wasn't as big as it was now, and I used to have a computer with a green screen. I didn't do it on that; it was all handwritten, but I practiced it first. So when I used to look into the police, I'd read experience of other gay officers some who came out later in service, their integrity was questioned, and issues around honesty, just because they never told people they were gay, which is very much a private matter. The former chief constable of Greater Manchester Police, I document it in the book, said gay people were swirling around a cesspit of their own doing, their own making. I mean, this is what I was up against. I was going to join this police force. And I think it's really important that when you join any organization, to take your true self to the organization. The police should have been recruiting me, not because I look different, because I think different. As a working class boy from Liverpool who is, black and gay, I bring something different to the table. So when I joined the police, to be quite specific to the answer, when I joined the police, I didn't say, hello, I'm Kevin, I'm black and gay. I was just Kevin. But they kept on reminding me I was different. So within the first couple of weeks of my training, I was referred to as an ethnic, and then I was the coconut incident, which is, you're black on the outside, you're white on the inside. And then I went to my first police station where homophobia was still rife. And when I spoke about my experiences to my seniors, and I was moved to a central Manchester police station, they already knew their own reports, which I wasn't aware of. They already knew homophobia was a problem. And they were fearful that victimization because of my sexuality was a problem at the station. That's why they moved me. And you've got to remember that I joined the police service in 2001. The Sexual Offences Act weren't repealed until 2004. So I'd served for 3 years where homophobia towards the LGBT community was still very much in your face, and also still battling the fallout from the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. And I'm a Scouser, a Liverpudlian. My city, I lived through the Hillsborough inquiry, and the Hillsborough football disaster. Like you say, I'm old enough to have been born during the riots. I was born before the riots, but to live through the riots as a young boy. All these do have an impact on you. So yeah, when I went to the police, I just wanted to be my whole self, but that wasn't actually possible.
Can you talk about the sort of the very beginning? Because on the one hand, there were people who wanted to use you as a poster boy. This is terrific. We've attracted this bright, black, university educated recruit, from working class background. This is terrific. Let's put him on all the posters. But on the other hand, there were already the things going on, which you've just talked about, which were unpleasant. So just talk about that. What do you think could have made a difference right at the beginning? If you were joining now in your first few weeks, what would have made a difference?
So there's two sort of answers to this. I mean, there's only one answer, but there's 2 points which you've made me think of. Is that had I been and this is not a derogatory slur to anybody else, had I been a yes person, and sort of fell in line pretty early on. It's a discipline service, but I mean in terms of wanting to be their poster boy or to be a token, it may have been different. But again, they shouldn't have been recruiting people like me for that reason. It's pointless recruiting lots of black people who think like the white majority organization. I'm not saying that in a negative way, but the reason why we have diversity and inclusion is to, embrace different communities and stuff. So I found it difficult to be my true self in the police force. And I guess had I played along in terms of used my characteristics, my intersectionality to my advantage, maybe it could have been different. But I didn't join for that reason. I just wanted to serve and protect. I didn't want promotion because of who and what I was. I didn't want any favoritism. I didn't want to be the poster boy. I document in the book where they spoke about potentially put me on billboards and stuff. That's not what I joined the police force for. I joined the police force to chase people through to arrest the bad guys, to chase bad guys through the streets, to make a difference. I didn't join to be on a PR campaign. I could have worked for an advertising agency for that. So I guess had I been a different person, a lot of people use this word integrity, but that was really important to me. I already knew myself before I joined the police force. I was just confident, happy-go-lucky young man from Liverpool who joined the police force, comfortable in his own skin, my race, and he was out to his friends, his family. I had nothing to hide. But as I went through the police service, I felt that I almost couldn't be my true self because of problems in the force to do with race and homophobia. So that's one answer. I guess had I played the game, not that there should be a game to be played, maybe that would have saved me. But equally, I think if I would have been more, what's the term people use, more hard-faced, hard-nosed, that I may have survived. But that's not that's not who I am. And I thought about this often.
I'm really sorry. That actually wasn't what I wanted. Although those are two incredibly good and interesting answers, I wasn't actually aiming it at you. I wondered what the police could have done, apart from treating you like every single other recruit. But would it have helped you having a mentor? Would it have helped you being more prepared? Would it have helped you having people who were strong standing beside you when you were getting comments in the police station? What could the police have put in place? No, I'm not. Your answers were very interesting, so thank you for that. But what could the police have done to make it work for you?
No, thank you. It wasn't clear, but yeah, no, that's a great question. I guess support in terms of they obviously did know because they were documenting my experiences when I experienced the racism training, they documented that. When I experienced the homophobia early on in my career, they documented that. These are the leaders. So they were aware, but no one ever came to me and said, Kevin, what's it like for you? Are you okay? They just left me to it, which is not really, in hindsight, wasn't really a great thing. I mean, I was one of 40 black male officers out of a sworn sworn officers of 8,000. You know, I was most units I worked in. I was only the only black guy, definitely the only out gay guy, and then they put those together. My intersexuality. People like me weren't just around. There weren't black gay officers in the force. I only know of 2 to this day. One in Manchester and one in the Met. There may be others, but because of the problems, maybe people can't come out. But I guess the police could have offered me more support. You know, mentorship. Again, the system should have worked for me. I shouldn't have to join an organisation where they have to make it different or make it work for me. I should just be able to progress naturally, like everybody else. But clearly, there's these issues, these problems, because we're talking about them. And mine's not the only experience. I'm just one of the officers who's documented it. You know, the audience here, it's, you know, lived experience of black and other minority officers are well documented in Britain. So, yeah, they could have done more. I mean, for example, you know, when I spoke to my leaders about the problems with racism and homophobia, they put the onus on me to sort it out. I am the employee, not the employer. I don't have that influence to change a whole organization, a whole service. I'm just, you know, one small person who just wants to do his job. But the racism and homophobia was impacting me.
Can I say that the really important thing about the book is there are two really strong threads. One is you and the way you were treated within the force, but the other one is the way you saw people like you being treated out on the streets, people, the way we talk about the whole stop and search, the way when you worked at Heathrow, the way the immigration worked, the way people were treated because of their names or their colour, and you wanted to change that too, didn't you?
It's the book is not it's not me getting back at the police or a sensational story. I'm the sort of person who, you know, when I'm a reflective person, so when I write something, I'm saying, is this going to help make our police service better? I've not written a book for the sake of it. I'm playing my part still to try and make our police force more fair, more just. So when I went about writing the book, you know, it has just under 600 citations, references at the back of the book, because I'm someone who made sure he dotted the I's, you know, crossed the T's, because that's just who I am. So it's important that, you know, when I'm writing about my lived experience, you know, it's not about poor me or I've got a small violin out, but I have to obviously tell my story so people can understand the problems. But again, what I did was brought in other stories, so from cases of other black, gay, and Asian officers in the force, men and women, and also members of the public, because again, it is a systemic cultural problem. You know, we know there's good police officers out there, but people make up the system. And to this day, even with all the well-documented issues around race. So for a member of the public, if you're black in Britain today, in October 2020, you're 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched than if you're white, 3 times more likely to be arrested, 4 times more likely to be tasered, 4 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act, twice as likely to die in police custody. And over half of our young people in young jails and young offenders institutions in England and Wales are black or brown, i.e. mixed race or Asian. That's atrocious. That is not progress. When black people only account for 3% of the population, how can we be so disproportionately represented? And if you look at police officers, you know, the BBC just done a survey, young black officers and Asian officers leave the police as quickly as they join. ITV recently done a survey where currently or in progress, you know, 2 out of 3, 2/3 of forces in England and Wales are facing race discrimination claims. It shouldn't be this way 40 years after the riots, 20 years after the report into Stephen Lawrence's horrific murder.
The other thing that is also very important to say, and this is very much part of the whole business about the grievance, the tribunal, is that you kept saying, this is not about individuals. This is not me having to write down what Fred or Charlie or Gavin said to me. You know, this is not about banter in the police office that I was supposed to kind of to brush off. This is actually about a whole institution, and this is about you not being promoted. This was about not being given opportunities, and yet it seemed that they never were able to deal with anything other than the things that were said to you. Do you think is that a fair summary of what you were trying to say? You were trying to make it general, and they were trying to make it specific.
I mean, yes, I want to be. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I want to be clear in terms of. I've just said before, we know there's good officers, but there's more than a few bad apples in the organisation. Because again, if you just put my story to one side, the Kevin Maxwell experience, it's well documented of other minority officers and members of the public. So for me, I've always been about the system, the culture, because I mean, you'll never find anything where I have called for the sacking of any individual officer. It's bigger than individual officers. I'm talking about, I'm not personal towards specific officers. It's a cultural problem. So you're right in terms of they just try to, I guess, make it out that it was not so much an isolated problem, but it's because I'm, black and gay. But, again, if you move me to one side, these same problems have happened to many other people, gay officers, black officers. And, I've worked in many forces in two of Britain's, I've worked in many units in two of Britain's biggest police forces, plainclothes, CID. I was a chief constable. I was a detective in the criminal investigation department, a detective in counterterrorism. That's why I say it's systemic, because the same problems were happening in these different units and different forces. And when I'd done my research for the book, I looked at other forces, Scotland, Wales. That's why it's definitely a problem in the UK and not just the US, which we always look to. So, for example, just to finish, when I raised these issues about confidence and public trust, they set up a very senior level, called gold groups at the top of Scotland Yard. These are where the very senior police officers in Britain get together and talk about how they're going to deal with the problem. Gold groups were set up about me. And, one of the aims of to be fair, it's their documented, the police force is an organisation of record, so it's their own documents, which I got under the Data Protection Act. But, one of their aims was, to protect the reputation of the police rather than sorting out the problem. And this is why I'm trying to address this. Again, I can appreciate, I'm not anti-police. I was someone who only wanted to serve, a boy with a dream. I served for 11 years, so I'm the least anti-racist, anti-police person, but they still weren't hearing it. And how much more do we keep on having to have this conversation? So they set up a goal group to sort of deal with, I guess, me, the problem, rather than deal with racism and homophobia, which is impacting so many people beyond me.
I think we should also say that this was happening at a time when the relationship between the press and the police was under scrutiny because of phone hacking, and your own records were leaked to a newspaper, weren't they?
Yeah, so, people talk about, Kevin, it's just one bad apple, this. Over 40 unlawful counts of discrimination, harassment, and victimization were found in a court of law against me because I'm black and I'm gay. That is shameful in modern society, that the police service, an organization who's entrusted to serve and protect, to treat people fairly and within the law, was found to have treated me differently because of my race and sexuality. And they leaked about me to a tabloid newspaper. But I'm trying to move beyond that, because I'm trying to think positive about all this. How can I change my negative experience into something positive? For people who may have written a book before, to the audience here, when I wrote Forced Out, and it was published a few months ago, you get 20 copies complimentary because you've done, a lot of work in writing the book. I sent a copy to the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police. I sent a copy to the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. And I wrote correspondence to the Chief Executive, Chief Constable of the College of Police. And, I signed the book saying, this is my lived experience to try and make the force better. Neither of those three people replied to me. And this is part of the problem. So I've just told you that a court of law in our country, in the UK, found that the police had treated me differently because of my race and sexuality. And I fell unwell because of that. To this day, no one has ever said sorry to me. No one has ever apologized. So if I was just making it up, that would be, and I have no reason to believe black people, gay people, whoever you are, make things up. So, people always say, oh, it wasn't proven. A court had found that the police had treated me differently. So we have that as a fact. And no one has, to this day, no one has ever said, sorry, Kevin, we got it wrong. And this is part of the culture which I'm, saying, where's people help me to find peace. So I'm having to find it myself. So writing this book was closing the chapter and that part of my life. I don't expect an apology. I'll probably die without getting one, but I think it's quite important to say this point here, because I, as a former officer who served for 11 years, a black gay officer who proved that the police are treating him differently in court, couldn't get an apology. Imagine the young black or gay man on the street or girl, who may have been mistreated, and an investigation found the police to be wanting there. There's no chance for them, and this is why, if we want to make our police force, it's not about getting back at the police. If we want to make our police force truly better and serve everybody fairly and equally and within the law, we have to have these hard, difficult conversations like you and I are having now. And, to be able to move forward, people need closure in their lives. I'm not asking for apology. I'm just stating a fact to you. I think it's quite, it's a clear message to me what the police force think of me, for never saying I'm sorry, which is just, for me, sorry is one word. And I wonder whether I would find peace, but, we are where we are. It is what it is.
Kevin, and we've got some questions, so I'm just going to come to a couple of those. And one of them is from somebody called Libby Watson. How much of an impact do you think cuts in policing numbers have had on this? Has it left less time for community outreach and positive community-based policing? And there's a lot of mistrust for the police too, not necessarily misplaced, she says. But you were in the police at a time of cuts, weren't you?
Yes, I talk about this, and I've written articles for newspaper magazines about this. Just to put a disclaimer out there, policing is a difficult job. Being a police officer, it's not an easy job. You're dealing with often hostile situations, etc. But we need our police to be better. That's why they're the police. They have this immense powers where they can take away our civil liberties. So I'm apolitical, so I'm not Lib Dem, Labour, or Conservative, but I'd probably be disingenuous if I said, cuts didn't have an impact on policing, but that's not an excuse for, and obviously the commentator's not saying this, but it's not an excuse for these entrenched prejudices like racism, homophobia, and sexism is still an issue. So, I've worked in units throughout my 11 years where, there was quite a few officers in that unit, but yet racism and homophobia was still an issue, was still rife. So, if we had more police officers, well, we just have more of the same. And that's not to be sensational. So I don't cut, having less police or more police is not the answer to solve the inequalities in the police. That's more of an operational issue, I would say, from my experience having served in two of Britain's biggest forces.
We've also got a question about criminologists. Someone wants to know if you met any criminologists in your career, and would that have made a difference if there was more, I guess it's kind of people studying the whole business of criminology alongside you doing the policing? Do you think that would have made a difference?
I've heard a lot of them. I've not met any, but I've watched Cracker in the past. Is that Robbie Coltrane? I'm sure he was a criminologist. But on a serious point, I meet young people now who are saying they're studying criminology, and and then they say they want to join the police. And I don't know. I mean, you can't beat lived experience, and I've said that a few times. So, you can do all the study in the world, you can read all the books, but you can't live that raw lived experience. So, when the police force, I'm not expecting a pat on the back for challenging the police or taking on the police or trying to make the police force better, and that's not the reason I did it. But if the police really wanted to make the service better in our country, in the UK, they would be studying my book in terms of what I saw and heard, not just my lived experience, but you mentioned earlier, like, the interaction I had with members of the Asian communities, who told me particular things and stuff, and, why people do what they do and stuff. And that's sort of not evidence, but that's sort of a documented experience you can't buy, literally. And again, when I was around the table, rather than taking on board what I was saying, like, for example, when we do this to Joe Bloggs, this may be the consequence. It was just dismissing the whole. So when I went to the employment tribunals, I went through a 6-week trial. The initial one, there was an appeal, and I was saying to the police, when we do this as a force, this is and this is how it impacts trust and confidence from Black and Asian communities, blah blah blah. They didn't deal with that. What they said is, "Oh, Kevin, you don't like white people. You've got a chip on your shoulder. You're the problem." This is documented, court documents. And, the person I love most in this world, God bless her, she's no longer here, is my beloved mother, Annie, who's, as white as white. And to say that is actually disrespectful. And I know courtrooms are, there's a lot of, drama to them. But, for me, I'm a human being. I was there for, a very serious cause to make the police service better. So I find those type of comments disrespectful. So I'm talking to the police leaders in an employment tribunal with regards to how racism impacts people like me, serving officers and members of the public. And their response is, "I've got a chip on my shoulder," which many black men have been told throughout the decades in our country.
There's a question here, and it's in the book, it's documented in the book, but I think it would be helpful if you answered it. And how was the support, if any, James says, from staff networks like the Black Police Association, and what could support networks have done differently?
Yes, that's a really, thanks, James, that's a really good question. When I fell unwell, so for 8 years, I'd never taken a single day's sickness from the police, and that's from transferring to Manchester to London. Even with a cough, a cold, a sore leg, I'd never taken a single day's sickness. So when I fell unwell after 8 years into my service, I knew something was wrong. Not it transpired that I was suffering from severe reactive depression because of the experience built up over 8 years. So when I, was trying to, I guess, come to terms with my depression and, worrying about my career and what will people. Depression, mental health still has a negative connotations to it. So I was dealing with all that, and the police didn't decide to help me. What they did was continue to pursue me negatively, and these are well documented. And by that I mean, for example, the police has a policy that when a member of staff falls unwell, you contact them every 2 weeks until they return to work, just to make sure they're okay. Are they resting, getting well? They were contacting me 40 times a week, which is 38 times. Or 39 of it, over the 2 weeks, beyond the policy. This was a found act at the employment tribunal because I was raising issues of race and homophobia. That made me more unwell. So when that started to happen, it's actually really sad for me to say this, but the police treated me worse when I made them aware that I was already unwell from depression. So when I fell unwell, had they sort of captured me and nurtured me and helped me and supported me, you and I probably wouldn't be having this conversation now. But because I fell unwell, they deemed me as a threat. So I didn't want to make it political by going to the Black Police Association or the Gay Police Association, because I wanted to keep control, and control in terms of not make it a big drama. I was just a person who was trying to get better and tell his employer that there's problems. And I felt at the time that it may have gone off in an avenue where I didn't want it to go. So I do believe support networks are really important, but I didn't access them. And I wonder in hindsight whether I should, but I do document in the book that some support networks are better than others. So there's a lot of work to be done with regards to staff associations as well in organizations.
It's I don't want to use the word depressing, but the thing about the book is that's depressing is the fact that things hadn't changed. In fact, at some point, somebody says things are worse than they were 20 years ago. And so I wondered how it was for you going back. I mean, you describe it as something you have to do and you're trying to use the book to make changes, but it must have been tough to go back over it all.
This is the second to last live interview I'm given before the book was published a few months ago. So I've, engaged with people as best I can to be honest about my experiences beyond in the book, and obviously confirming what's in the book and stuff. But I've been pondering quite a lot, and my life should be no less than another person's. And for me, living that experience was dreadful. In hindsight, it was dreadful. I questioned my entire life. That's actually, I think if my mum was alive, I mean, even saying that, I sort of had a bit of shame there. And even though I'm not the one who was raised to homophobia, but that's actually quite a sad thing for someone to say. So I felt I had to document my experiences because they were really important, so the police can see that their behavior does have consequences. That's what happened in my case. So for me, I found it therapeutic, but it was also hell, reliving, the very personal comments which were said about me, the very personal things. I mean, my entire personal information was leaked to a tabloid newspaper, not because I was a bad officer or I insulted anyone or, abused anyone, because I fell unwell and I told my employers because of race and homophobia. That's wrong. You can't dress that up any other way. That's why it was found at court. That's wrong. And if police leaders don't acknowledge that to this day, and I go back to the apology, how can we ever make our organizations better? And that's why I don't keep on mentioning the apology so I can feel better, although, it may bring individuals peace. If the police don't even accept my lived experience, which is well documented, with just under 600 references, most of them their own documents and findings at a court of law, there's no hope for anybody else. And this is why I wrote the book. So people like you, people in my country, the press, the public, and the politicians can look at my story, my lived experience, and others, and call for change in the police, because we shouldn't be talking about the same issues 40 years on from the riots, which Bristol, Toxteth, Moss Side, and Brixton, in these great British cities. We shouldn't be talking about the same problems 40 years on. And again, Stephen Lawrence is not the only young black person to be killed on the streets of Britain, but 20 years since the report by Sir William Macpherson into Stephen's horrific death. I haven't got the answers. All I've done is to do my bit to try and make our police force better. And anyone who knows me from schooling, primary, secondary, in the police, many officers serving and retired have contacted me proudly. Many haven't got the confidence to say it publicly. I think they know my, not motive, but the reason why I wrote the book is to try and make our police force better. Because if you go back to the original story, I'm a boy. And I smile when I think about it. I was a boy with a dream. In the UK, when we leave high school, secondary school, at 16, you have a record of achievement. And you say what you want to be when you're older, when you leave school. From 5 to 16, 11 years on, I still documented in my school record of achievement, I wanted to be a policeman. It wasn't even about political correctness. I just wanted to be a policeman. It wasn't police officer, because that's what I saw. As you get older, you learn about the world better. But, it never left me, that dream, right up until university. And I guess that's why my intentions are good and they're pure. And I just think it's important that we have this really documented book of what it was like for a black gay officer in modern Britain.
Kevin, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and it's lovely, having read the book, to see you cheerful, and good luck with everything you do, and let's hope people do read it and within the police and do take note of it. And let me just remind people, it's called Forced Out, and you can buy a copy from our friends at Waterstones, and there's a link at the bottom of the page. And let me also just say that our autumn programme obviously has moved online this year, but we're still going to be featuring writers and thinkers from all over the world, people like Kevin. So you can sign up to our e-newsletter via the website. You can follow us on Twitter, and you can stay up to date with the latest events. And you can watch this again on Crowdcast, and it's also going to be added to our YouTube channel. So if you've been watching this tonight and you want to commend it to a friend and say this was an extraordinary young man talking about his experiences in the police force, then you'll be able to let your friends watch it too. So Kevin, a really great pleasure, and good luck with everything, and maybe things will change.
Yeah, I live in hope.